let me open the floor. Brother Muhammad, how do you address this issue of what we just saw in this video in 13? How do you frame this in your own words?
I heard the guy say that I heard just in the video him saying that a lot of people, livelihood is tied to the penal system, which means the majority of the people inside the institution that benefits from it, their livelihood, do not want to see it elevated, or do not want to see it eradicated, or the inmates become better because they feel like it takes from them and their household. So sitting here today, us trying to figure out how to better reform the system, the people who are benefiting from the system see us as their enemy versus someone who is trying to alleviate a lot of tension off society. So I was just saying that sometimes it's not that they want to implement slavery, but that they don't want to lose what benefits them and what take care of their household, what feeds them, what clothes their children, what put gas in their cars. So I mean, it's hard. It's on two fronts. I was reading a few days ago, preparing for this panel, and I seen in 1902 they had what they call convict leasing. So that's one mindset that says, okay, it's slavery, and then on another mindset you have people who are just trying to make a living off the system. But regardless of either or, the system have to be reformed in order for the people to benefit, those who are incarcerated, to benefit on their release or while they're yet incarcerated.
Professor Cummins, you teach contracts, and I would ask that you frame this in the contracts and legal analysis.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you all for being here tonight, and I wanted to just, before I frame it in the legal analysis, wanted to thank Zach Crow and Decarcerate for organizing this important event tonight, and all of you for being here. We'll also be joined by about 35 of my contract students in about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we may all leave a little early. So part of class tonight is this panel. You know, I wanted to quickly say that two of the folks that we just listened to are Brian Stevenson and Michelle Alexander. They were two of the folks that were just speaking, and they've both written really important books. I'm sure you know of them, but one of the books by Brian Stevenson is called Just Mercy. And it describes the reasons that we really need to reform prison sentencing and policy in the United States from a legal perspective. And then Michelle Alexander's book is The New Jim Crow, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well. And that talks about, they both did a really nice job of tracing a timeline that I want to talk about legally for just a moment before we hear from other panelists. Anytime the African American condition in the United States has improved legally, the abolition of slavery, the abolition of Jim Crow, there has been a new legal structure that has come into being almost immediately that has taken those advances or freedoms away from African American folks. And so as soon as slavery is abolished, then we see the convict leasing system grow up. We see the rise of the black codes that were passed shortly after slavery was abolished that made it so that African Americans really weren't free. They were declared free in the 13th Amendment, but really not free. And then we have the system of Jim Crow grow up in the United States, which was a legal justification for separate but equal, legally justified by the United States Supreme Court in astonishingly poor Supreme Court decisions like Plessy versus Ferguson and Dred Scott. And in those particular instances, we had all white male judges pronouncing that African Americans were not citizens, they had no rights that any white person was bound to respect. That's the law of the land in the United States following slavery, which grows up into the Jim Crow, whites only, separation, separate but equal, and then finally we have a breakthrough. The breakthrough is the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Two of the acts to finally eliminate the separation and the separate but equal, and then what happens right after the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act? Richard Nixon declares a war on drugs. And he says, I have a clip if we have time for it later, where he says, drug abuse in the United States is public enemy number one. And we're going to wage an all-out war on drugs. And we've seen now, 70, 80, 90, 2000, 40 or 50 years later, it was really a war on black people and brown people. We see no fewer drugs in the United States today than we did 40 or 50 years ago when the war on drugs was declared. So Michelle Alexander, Brian Stevenson, and I, if I can put myself in their company, would argue that the war on drugs was really just another opportunity to oppress and to take away the hard-fought freedoms that were just extended to African American folks. And the war on drugs continues till today. It's now a war on immigration, but it's still a war on black and brown people in the United States. And so if we were to figure out a way to legally construct a system of equality, it would require us to completely dismantle mass incarceration and to start over in the way we incarcerate human beings in the United States. Because at the end of the day, the law continues to support a war on black and brown people, such that 6.5% of our population are black men in the country, yet 40% of our prison population is black men. And if you add Latino males, then our prison system is disproportionately black and brown people of color, mostly for drug and violent crimes.
Representative Flowers, you bring to this conversation the experience of a policymaker, and thank you for introducing legislation last week in a proposal, at least, to remove the language in the 13th Amendment of the Arkansas Constitution that allows for slavery in the case of someone convicted of crime. How did you come to this awareness, and how do you bring your force to bear on this issue?
So, thank you for the question. Thank everyone for being here this evening, and certainly thank Zach and Decarcerate. I, in college, graduated as a political science student and had read this before, and I think, and probably even in high school, but never thought about it in terms of something that could be changed. Always saw it as, that's terrible, wonder why they did that. And fast forward many years later, I'm in a meeting preparing for the session, sitting down with Zach and Senator Elliott, and we're going over the legislative agenda, and we're looking at 3 bills. And ironically, of the 3 bills, I thought, well, that's still horrible and it'll never pass in this environment. And I don't even know, when I say this environment, I don't just mean me being a Democrat and being in a super minority. I guess I really mean in this environment in the South, in an environment where I believe part of what makes this okay in the eyes of most policymakers, in the eyes of most Americans, is that there is a dehumanization that takes place in rhetoric, in literature, in media, in policies, and And then obviously even in our Constitution, state and federal, that just sort of makes this okay. And so the more we talked about it and the more I read about it, you know, now I don't care that it won't pass. As long as I'm in the legislature, it's gonna come up every session. And we're gonna talk about it every session. And I think that the perspectives you've already heard and that you'll continue to hear on this panel, it's not just about sort of what's on paper, but what's on paper does drive and serve as an impetus for what we're allowed to say and think, and that being the norm, that being part of our culture, that being part of our laws. We always say we're a nation of laws, and people talk about law and order, and so you can't dismiss this, which is the very foundation of our law, and then kind of, and then not want to change. You can't dismiss this. You can't believe that the enslavement of people is wrong, and then not fight to repeal or change or amend the Constitution. It just doesn't fit.
D'Angelo Lee, you bring a personal perspective to this issue. You know of this not because of what you read, because of life experience. Would you mind sharing that, please?
Thanks, Zach, for having me out on this panel. I was looking at this video, and some of the things that stuck out to me the most was the psychological, mental treatment of individuals that are behind those walls. Quite sure Brother Kirk can relate to this, how individuals that have been there for so long feel like the prison is the right way. They leave prison, 6 months later, they're back in prison again. And I could never really understand why a person would want to continue to come back to a place that treats you like an animal. Where I would ask individuals, why are you coming back? You know, it's almost, it took me back to the plantation days where the slaves were asked to be free, and you had so many of them say, no, I don't want to leave, master. You know, I have a good master. And it's like that in the prison system, where so many brothers would leave and come back. They say, well, I know I got 3 hots in the cot. You know, I can't make it out there in society. And I witnessed that for years, you know, in that prison system, man. And I made a vow that once I was released, that I was going to do something different. I was not going to be a statistic to return back to that system. Through our organization and meeting brothers and sisters, you know, out here, Zach and Marvy and Ruby, you know, we made a pledge and a vow to do something different about it. It's sad because you have brothers that have worked hard, develop trades in prison, whether it be carpentry, building prisons, and they can't even get a job once they return back to society. I don't want to say society, but return back into our communities, you know? So it's almost like what the guy said on the video. Why would I give you the information and tools that you need to make it once you leave here, when I know that you're going to return back in 6 months and make more money for me? So it's a slave mentality, a slave way of thinking. You know, that's the cycle that we have to break. You know, and brothers like us that are here on the forefront, that been there, that witnessed this, that we're hopeful, a lot of those men behind those walls. You know, there is a way out. You know, there's strength in numbers. So as long as I can keep us divided as a people, then I conquer what my mission is. You know what I'm saying?